Okay, Deuteronomy 22. The next 4 chapters are going to be about day-to-day living in this new community. Remember, like someone pointed out a few weeks ago, they are building a whole nation. They're building a new government. I don't know if it had ever been done to build, I mean, at one point someone started a government. But even like the United States, when we think of a new nation, we modeled off of someone else. The Israelites, when they're building a new nation, there is no other model they are following, because they are following God, and no other nation followed God. So they are having to, God has given them every tiny little detail they need, because God doesn't want them to be like their neighbors. So instead of being like your neighbors, here's what you're going to do. And it's different than anything they've ever seen. So these chapters are like, some of the details are, for the next few chapters, are wowzer. So let's look at verses 1 through 4. And Olga, I'm going to start with you.
22. If you see your fellow Israelitish ox or sheep straying, do not ignore it, but be sure to take it back to its owner. If they do not live near you, or if you do not know who owner is, take it home with you and keep it until they come looking for it. 1 and 2?
Through 4.
Then give it back. Do the same if you find their donkey or flock or anything else they have lost. Do not ignore it.
One more verse. Sorry.
If you see your fellow Israelitish donkey or ox fallen on the road, do not ignore it. Help the owner get it to its feet.
Okay, so here God is condemning the act of doing nothing. When it says you shall take care of your brother, talking about the brother, does anyone's version say countrymen? There's some rare versions that say countrymen. It is talking about your fellow Israelite. If they are in need, you are to help them.
But if a set countryman wouldn't, I would take that to mean, okay, my countrymen would be anybody in the U.S. And so countrymen would be anybody in Israel.
And that's what he's talking about here, your fellow Israelites. Now the story of the prodigal son, not the prodigal son,
The Good Samaritan.
The Good Samaritan, just expands that even more. Because you remember who didn't help were his countrymen.
Countrymen didn't.
His brothers. The one who helped was the Samaritan, not his countrymen. So Jesus expanded this. But at this point, they're saying your fellow Israelite. God is saying, if you see your brother in need and don't do anything, that's evil. That's sin. When the opportunity to do good comes up, you need to take it. You need to do good. So he gives examples. The first one is you find a lost animal. No finders keepers. That was not a concept in Israel. You had to do everything you could to try to find the owner. If you couldn't find the owner, you held on to the animal until, good morning, until you found the owner. And you would take care of that animal. And when you find out who it belongs to, you give it up, no question. And it adds some other things. It adds your garment. It adds anything. So if you found a lost anything, you tried to find the owner. If you didn't find the owner, you held onto it and gave it to the owner as soon as it as soon as they showed up. If the owner lived far away, you fostered the animal until they show up.
I had, not long after we moved in, there was a dog running up and down our street, and I could tell it was lost. And I finally got it in our backyard, and the gal came, and now her in-laws live in the house and I'm known as the lady who took the dog, took care of the dog, or brought it in so they didn't run away.
Yeah.
So, that even happens these days.
Yeah. And of course to them, animals are so important. Yeah. That's their livelihood. So you give it back. You don't put your brother in a bad spot. The Hebrew word used here means don't hide yourself. Don't live with blinders on to the needs of your neighbors. Mm-hmm. Then we have example 2. An animal falls down, and you're to help your neighbor get that animal up. It doesn't say how the animal fell down. It might have slipped. It might have fallen down under a heavy burden that it shouldn't be carrying. So you don't get to play sanctimonious and say, well, you overloaded that animal, you don't deserve that animal. No, you help them lift the animal up. You could talk to him after, but the main thing is get that animal up and help. Could you imagine if you came across an elephant?
Oh,
How that would be. They didn't really have that.
elephants.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Jesus went after the lost sheep. Well, the story of the lost sheep.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, help your brother save the animal and give it back. If you don't, it's sin. So help them. So how are you doing in that aspect? I don't want anyone to answer, because then I have to answer too.
If you find a dog wandering on the street, it looks lost. Think of him.
Are you a good sister to fellow believers? If you see someone in need, are you going alongside them? Or do you sit back and think someone else is going to help? And that's not what God wants from us. He wants us to reach out and help each other. If we see someone in need, don't put blinders on. Step up and help. And that's what makes a strong fellowship of believers, when we do that for each other. And I think our church does a good job of that. But we have to be aware of people that may slip through the cracks. We do that maybe with some ladies that we know well, but then there may be others we don't know well, or they're really good at hiding things. But maybe there's clues. We need to, for anyone. Okay, verse 5.
A woman shall not wear a man's garment, nor shall a man put on a woman's cloak. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God.
Oh, has this been a misused verse?
That's where I'll say.
I was going to bring a big rock so we could throw it at anyone who's not wearing a dress. Because lots of churches have used it for that, haven't they?
Oh, yes.
And that is, think about what the Israelite dress everybody wore.
Cloak. It was clothes a lot.
Can you tell a big difference between men's clothes and women's clothes in those days? So it's not talking about a woman wearing pants. It's talking more about the idea of a woman trying to act like a man, or a man trying to act like a woman. And we've seen plenty of that in our days. So in those days, they wore long robes and wrapping garments, and If there was any difference, it was in how they wore them. Because, of course, men had to wear it in a way so that if they had to go into battle, they could gird up their loins. They would grab the back part of their robe and pull it up, and women didn't have to do that. But, again, there's churches today that will use this as a weapon.
Oh, yes, they make a law.
Yeah, you better not show up to their church in a dress or in pants.
In pants, yeah.
Nowadays, dresses. So overall, this is seen as cross-dressing, transvestites, and gender bending things. Is confusing the sexes, is what it's talking about. God is saying here, a man is a man, act like a man. A woman is a woman, act like a woman. Now, they did a lot of cross-dressing in their neighboring communities. When they worshipped Astarte, the worshipers dressed as the opposite sex. So God is also saying, stay away from those pagan idolatrous practices. Don't do that. When you allow it, it wreaks havoc on your community. Look at our communities now. There is a distinction between men and women. And look at how God feels about it. Abomination.
Yeah.
He hates it.
Other thing now.
Yeah. So it's okay. Keep wearing your jeans and your slacks. We won't throw stones at you. Okay, verse 6 and 7.
If a bird's nest happens to be before you along the way, in any tree or on the ground with young ones or eggs, with the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall surely let the mother go and take the young for yourself, that it may be well with you and that you may prolong your days.
This is the only place in the Bible that we see this command. And it may seem kind of confusing, but it is really kind of like, once you understand it, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So you see a bird and you see the eggs. And it's okay to take the eggs, but not the bird, because the bird can lay more eggs. And it keeps that species going. If you take the bird and the eggs, you're going to run out of whatever kind of bird that is eventually. So it sustains your society.
Do they take the eggs because they're going to eat it?
Yeah.
But just like chicken.
They're going to have an omelet or something like that. They're preserving their food sources. So there's some Jewish commentaries that say this is the smallest commandment. But it even the smallest commandment commands obedience. Some look at this as an act of kindness to the mother bird. I would think taking your babies, that's not very kind, but being able to do this means obedience in the small things means you're more likely to be obedient in the bigger things. If someone is cruel to animals, they're more likely to be cruel to people. The mother of the kid that did the shooting at Oxford High School, she's asking the courts in Michigan to exclude evidence of her son's supposed abuse of baby birds.
What?
He's on trial for shooting up a school.
Oh.
And in the trial, they want to bring up the fact that he used to persecute baby birds.
Well, good.
And the mom saying, oh, no, we want that excluded.
Yeah, of course.
And the court's saying, no, that's
Shows
it shows a
Yeah.
pattern.
Oh, good.
And if you see a lot of people that, some people that have gone on to become mass murderers, it starts off with animals. So God wants kindness to animals.
There's a commercial on TV and it's showing these dogs. You can see their bones. They have a
Oh, yeah, I
I
don't.
cannot watch those.
I can't either. I flip the TV as fast as I can.
Yeah. Okay, here's another command. Verse 8.
So how do you know that's a command? I mean,
Oh, in the Hebrew, the words
that?
used
Okay.
are,
Do not.
Do not.
yeah. Okay, Miss Betty, verse 8.
Just the one verse.
Yep.
Forgive your people, Israel, whom you have redeemed.
Oh, are you in the right?
Am I at the right place?
22 verse 8.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong page.
That's a nice verse, but
When you build a new house, now, is that the right one?
Yeah.
Okay. When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof, so that you will not bring blood guilt on your house if anyone falls from it.
okay. So a parapet.
What is that?
It's a rail.
Rail.
Oh,
Yeah.
And those houses were going to be flat roofs, and so they
Yeah.
have to put up.
They built flat roofs and they used it as a spare room. In the summer when it was hot, they slept out there. There was a party area. It was their patio. They did a lot of living on that roof. So
Roof.
yeah, it had to be a strong roof. So when you see the story of the friends lowering,
Yes.
had to be a different kind of roof because these had to be strong roofs because they carried people.
Yeah.
Could have been a different part of the house, but they would have had the patio then.
Yeah.
Yeah, they might have either. Yeah, it was either a different kind of roof or they were really, really, really
They were
determined.
intent on getting him in.
Yeah, and they did, and that would add even more to that story. So homeowners were responsible to make sure their guests were safe.
Not too much different.
So and remember, if someone died, someone was responsible for taking revenge for that person, even if it was an accident. So if you were a homeowner and someone fell off your roof, the goel, the avenger, would be coming after you. You'd have to run. You'd have to go to one of those cities and move there because
unless you had a railing.
if they fell accidentally over the railing, same thing. But you're to do everything you can. Now, you would be found innocent at the city, but you still, if you stepped outside that city,
It could be whatever.
the avenger could come get you. So, put the railing up and avoid that problem. Put a good railing up.
Don't let people get too drunk on your
Right.
Yeah. You were responsible for.
Well, and even now, like high-rise buildings with the windows, you hear ever so often about a child is falling out the window because there's nothing, so they,
Yeah.
you know.
And it's more than a railing. It's more like you build up
It's a block wall.
yeah, more of a block. So it's not
And
something kids could
build
go
up
through.
more than just.
Yeah, you make it that low, and people trip over it, and they're more likely to. So you had to take care of things. Now, the Muslim philosophy of life was that everything happens according to the will of Allah. If accidents happen, it's God's will. It's called a fatalistic approach. Now, but God holds us responsible if we fail to take action to prevent accidents. So in a Muslim society, seatbelts don't make sense because if God wills you're going to die, you're going to die in a car. But here, if you die in a car accident and not wear your seatbelts, your insurance is going to have problems with that. So we're not in a fatalistic society that says whatever happens is God's will. We have to take preventative action. Now, does God's will still happen Yes. So, some examples that we do. We keep medicine out of the reach of children.
Yeah.
We cover up our electrical outlets. You stop at stop signs? Maybe. Or stop lights? Maybe. We do these things as a safety thing. Charles Spurgeon preached about this verse, and he said there was to be a railing for the protection of the people on the roofs of Israel's homes. There's also spiritual railings for our protection. He said many people in regard to sin get too close to the edge and fall off. Then it's too late. We need to have railings protecting us from the edge. Such railings will not only protect us, but others also. So, you can make a whole sermon out of one verse.
That's nice.
And again, this is the only place you find this command.
And did he say more what should be our railings? I mean, I know.
It should be what?
Did he say more about what kind of railing spiritual?
Nope. This is the only place. But they were smart enough to know how to do that. And I don't know if the Midrash puts more detail, because they like to add detail. The rabbis like to add a lot of detail. So I don't know if they added more.
I think about the hedge that God put around Job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He hedges us.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to put the hedge of blood of Jesus as a protection.
I think that's what Spurgeon was saying.
Yeah. That's
Yeah. Don't just walk around saying what God wills will happen.
Right.
No, prepare yourself. Okay, verse 9 through 12.
You shall not sow your vineyard with two kinds of seed, lest all the produce of the seed which you have sown and the increase of the vineyard become filed. You shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. You shall not wear a material mixed with wool and linen together. You shall not make yourself tassels on your four corners of your garment with which you cover yourself.
Okay, verse 12, it says, you will. I know the first time I read it, it was like, you will not. Oh, wait, there's no knot in there. You will make tassels. We have all these knots, and then something you will do. Okay, each of these are meant to separate Israel from its pagan neighbors. The pagans would commonly combine things they thought would make it a magical combination. The vineyards. This is actually the practice of sowing a different crop in between your vines. God says no. In today's agricultural world, they actually do that.
They do.
They do.
Roses or something down between.
Different kind of crops.
Right.
Miracles around.
Miracles.
Yeah.
To keep bugs
Yeah.
out of certain things. So.
But God saw this as mixing different kinds of crops and and so they wouldn't be worthy for holy use.
Yeah.
So he said no. They don't, and he doesn't say why. The ox and the donkey thing. So there's several options about this one. One, the ox was a clean animal. The donkey wasn't. So it was mixing a clean with an unclean. Another idea is, this is a fun one. Donkeys apparently had bad breath. Really bad breath. I've never gone up to a donkey and smelled its breath, but apparently really potent breath. And so it's protecting the ox from this stinky mouth. It was something that they ate, made it really stinky. The other thing is that an ox, imagine the size of an ox and the size of a donkey.
Those lines would never be straight.
Yeah, right.
No.
Well, it's not fair to the donkey It's not fair to the ox, and yeah, it's kind of dumb. You're not going to have straight furrows or anything else.
And it's funny to see kind of two animals.
Maybe that's why he has bad breath. He's smaller than the donkey, smaller than the ox, and he'll keep the ox away.
It could be, yeah. That could be a protection thing. The clothing thing. We've actually seen the clothing thing before. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, it says the priests had certain clothes that were mixed fabric, but no one else could have mixed fabrics. Because again, for the pagans, it was combining it to be magical. God didn't want them to be like the pagans. Back in Exodus 28, that's where we see where the priests were told to mix different kind of fabrics. And the Mishnah, it adds so much more detail. That's one of the books that the rabbis wrote, that they wanted to explain everything, but it's not in the Bible. So the tassels thing, we've seen that before. They were to wear tassels at the end of their
prayer shawl type thing.
Yeah, that was to separate them from their pagan neighbors. We saw this back in Numbers 15. He commanded them to show fringed borders on their garments. As a reminder, it reminds them to obey God and to speak to Him. And it's visual. Other nations would see these tassels and know, oh, that's an Israelite, because no one else did that. If you see practicing Jews today, you'll see their prayer shawls with the tassels on it today. I think they tend to do blue tassels.
Yeah, we did a Bible study, that one by Christina Cullen, that talked about the tassels.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it was interesting, by the way. Amber and Vince and I went to Vegas to get a new keyboard, and we went to lunch, and they had the Missoula. Remember we talked about that thing on the door where you touch it, and they had one on their door. I meant to look it to see if it was on all the doors.
Yeah, I didn't see it on all we exited.
Yeah, and it was crooked, like we've seen. Crooked. Yeah, they're crooked. So
you went to a Jewish deli for lunch.
It wasn't even supposed to be a deli. It was just a little cafe kind of thing. So it was funny to see it.
Yeah, and for those that weren't here, it is a little strip. It's hollow inside, so they put a scripture in there, and they mount it on every door. And as they go through the door, they're supposed to touch it and remember God. And it is tilted because two sets of priests could not agree on whether it was supposed to be up and down or sideways. So it's that way. Really spiritual reason, that way. But it was interesting to see, still in use.
Well, who gets to read the scripture inside then? Yeah.
What's that?
Read the scripture.
Inside?
Yeah.
You don't see this. It's inside the thing. You don't see it. You know what it is. Most of the time it is the Shema, which is love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind.
Oh, it's the same one all the time.
Not always.
Oh.
Most of that's the one that is the scripture to use, but it doesn't have to be that one.
Oh.
But something to remind you of God.
It's kind of interesting. I think I read an article about it, and it was that the Jewish people don't really agree always on what's in there and what the meaning of it is. You know how those things get so.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it's history or just passed down in their families, and they were arguing about what was really in and what did it mean and what were you supposed to do. And
well, in the time of Jesus, remember two big political parties. There were more. Yeah, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, way different beliefs.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, they just can't agree. They have their interpretations, as do we. Lots of people have different interpretations. Okay, where did I leave off? Amber, you Okay, good.
It's fun ones.
Yeah,
This section's so wonderful.
13 through 21.
Oh man, what?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go change side seats over there. If any man takes a wife and goes into her and then hates her and accuses her of misconduct and brings a bad name upon her, saying, I took this woman, and when I came near her, I did not find her in evidence of virginity, then the father of the young woman and her mother shall take and bring out the evidence of her virginity to the elders of the city in the gate. And the father of the young woman shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man to marry, and he hates her. And behold, he has accused her of misconduct, saying, I did not find in your daughter evidence of virginity. And yet this is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the cloak before the elders of the city. Then the elders of that city shall take the man and whip him, and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver, and give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought a bad name upon the virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife. He may not divorce her all his days. But if the thing is true, the evidence of virginity was not found in the young woman, then they shall bring out the young woman to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death with stones, because she has done an outrageous thing in Israel by whoring in her father's house. So you shall purge the evil from your midst.
Isn't this a lovely story? This is not a Hallmark movie. Okay, the man marries this woman, and on their wedding night, he discovers she's not a virgin. In their culture, virginity was so valued. It was considered a huge loss to give up your virginity before marriage. It was important to them to have a clean line of inheritance. And if a woman slept with someone else, you can't be sure who's the father of a child, and you needed a clean line of inheritance. You needed to know what tribe you belonged to, besides the moral issues of that. So in this case, it seems like this husband believes his wife deceived him.
Or he just doesn't.
Yeah, we'll get to that part.
Okay,
That's
sorry.
it. That's in there.
Okay.
Don't get way ahead. That's yeah. So he feels cheated, and if it's true, and nothing's done, no one would want to marry her. So the first time a bride slept with her husband, they would lay a special cloth down. And it would collect the small drops of blood that would happen with the first intercourse, and that was evidence of her virginity. Unfortunately, that's not really always reliable. But that's what they did. And that blood-stained cloth became the property of her parents. Wouldn't that be a great souvenir?
So that's what they brought as proof?
Yep. Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes these brides are 12 years old.
Yeah.
And that's not, that evidence wouldn't happen. Or if the bride has, did you know a lot of horseback riding would?
Yeah.
What?
I heard that.
Yeah, if you do a lot of horseback riding.
Come on. Really?
Yeah.
If you do a lot of horseback riding, it breaks your hymen.
Yeah. Now girls didn't usually do that, but so it's not a completely reliable thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there are some cultures even today that they have to do the virginity checks to make sure the hymen's intact.
If
And
you-
if it's not, then they can even go as far as saying that you can't file that you were sexually assaulted because you weren't a virgin. So
Yeah,
it's your
if
fault.
you watch movies about kings and queens getting married and stuff, and everybody always watching that cloth. You know, Henry VIII, that cloth was there with every wife. So for whatever reason, it seemed to work in this culture. It could be that someone who married a 12 or 13-year-old girl knew. And it is still practiced in parts of the world. So if the man wrongly accuses his bride, parents show up and say, look what I got. I would die of embarrassment as a girl. But it was their culture. Yeah, it was something to be proud of. And the guy would have to pay a huge fine.
100 shekels.
100 shekels of silver. That's double what a dowry was, typical dowry was. And he cannot divorce her ever. They are married for life.
Happy days.
Yeah, it protects her children's right to inheritance too, because she is the first wife forever. If she has a child, her firstborn son is the firstborn son. And again, even if she was falsely accused and they divorced, she'd still be undesirable. But God didn't allow that. So it was a pretty good deterrent against making a false accusation, because that's a lot of money. But if it was true, there goes the stoning thing. Now, typically, stoning happened outside the city gates. Every time we've seen it, it was outside the city gates, but not this time. The father is held responsible for his daughter's actions, so the punishment happened at his door. Yeah, that would be hard. Because
Say that again.
if she was not a virgin, she was stoned outside her father's house, not outside the city gates like normal. But notice, it seems like a double standard. The woman's stoned, but if the man lied, he's fined.
Well, the woman wouldn't have any money.
Yeah. Maybe it was punishment enough that he had to stay married to her.
Well, it also says in verse 18 that the elders of that city shall take the man and whip him. And still
there was whipping. Yeah, there was whipping.
But then she was passing herself off as a virgin when she wasn't.
Yeah.
So,
although we also know that was not a reliable thing. This is another one of those things where we don't see this practice carried out. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Maybe it never happened, or maybe it happened all too often. That why bother writing about it? Because it was common day. But this was what was supposed to happen.
But they already knew all this from Leviticus and Numbers. And
Well, we haven't seen this.
Oh, we haven't seen this.
No, a lot of the stuff in this chapter are like.
Because some of it that we've read has been back in Leviticus.
Yeah, some of it traces back, and some of it
they
is.
never talked about this before.
Well, they had the to see if the woman was adulterous or not by drinking the water.
Yeah. That water thing, but yeah. Okay, verse 22. That's because you can handle it.
If a man is found sleeping with another man's wife, both the man who slept with her and the woman must die. You must purge the evil from Israel.
Okay, so what happened when the adulterous woman was brought before Jesus? Where was the guy? They were not obeying this command. Adultery, death penalty. How many people today would be dead if that was true?
Oh my goodness.
We wouldn't have adultery going on.
No, you wouldn't have anybody left.
Yeah.
Well, think about it, a lot of leaders in history would be replaced very quickly.
Yeah. Well, and it would be a big deterrent if we actually did it. So the man and the woman are equally guilty. But still, this was rarely carried out because you needed two witnesses. And how many people committing adultery have witnesses standing by? Dottie, this is another chunk. Mary, you just ended up right in the middle of two big chunks. Verses 23 through 29.
You're just picking on the small people.
If there is a young woman who is a virgin engaged to a man, and another man encounters her in the city and has sex with her, you must take the two of them out to the gate of that city and stone them to death. The young woman, because she did not cry out in the city, and the man, because he has violated his neighbor's fiancé. You must purge the evil from you. But if the man encounters an engaged woman in the open country and he seizes and rapes her, only the man who raped her must die. Do nothing to the young woman, because she is not guilty of an offense deserving death. This case is just like one in which a man attacks his neighbor and murders him.
2 through 29.
When he found her in the field, the engaged woman cried out, but there was no one to rescue her. If a man encounters a young woman, a virgin who is not engaged, takes hold of her and rapes her, and they are discovered, the man who raped her must give the young woman's father 50 silver shekels, and she must become his wife because he violated her. He cannot divorce her as long as he lives. So she has to live with the rapist? Oh boy.
Yes.
God did not condone rape.
But the girl has to suffer.
Yeah.
A lot of
Well,
cultures still do this.
but a girl that had been raped, no man's going to want to marry. So God is giving her a husband so that she can have children. I mean, she may not like the situation. Her only other alternative,
Is to be a prostitute.
pretty much.
And she may not, they may not have relations after they get married, but he has to provide for her the rest of her life.
Yeah, yeah. And if they do have relations, her children are the firstborn. Her son is the one that inherits everything.
Assuming that
He doesn't already have a
that he
wife.
didn't already have a
Yeah.
wife.
Yeah.
But if he already had a wife,
Yeah.
she would fall down.
Isn't it interesting how convoluted rape is these days? I mean, it's
Amen.
they never can seem to get to, I don't know, figuring out who's.
Well, there's a lot of police stations that are so backlogged with the kids that by the time they get to it, the DNA and everything is corrupted, so they never get justice.
And the
So-
kids, the little children are the ones that suffer, that'll come out of this situation, you know?
So let's look at each situation. The first one, you have a girl that's engaged. In their society, she's considered married. She's still considered a wife. But she is raped within the city. And this just seems so unfair. If she does not cry out, no rape.
So he's got his hand over her mouth.
Yeah. Who knows the thinking of God? But
I guess God could give her the ability to scream.
She could
yeah, if there was a moment without his hand over her mouth, she was expected to scream.
Just like David's daughter.
But nowadays, if you scream rape, they'll ignore you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to scream fire.
Yeah.
So, and she was to be executed with the man because it would have been considered,
Consensual.
well, adultery on her part because she's considered married.
Right.
just because she didn't cry out while she was in the city. But if it happens in the countryside, the next scenario, where it wouldn't matter how loud she screamed, no one would hear her, it is not. It is rape. And only the man's executed. Now, if the woman isn't engaged, the man well, third scenario. So a man rapes, I'm going to use the word rapes even though it says lies with her, an unbetrothed girl, and someone finds them. If they were both married, it would be like adultery, stone them. In this case, no, he has to pay money to dad. It's 50 shekels, which is still, it's the dowry price, and he has to marry her rest of her life. We've talked about that. Some Jewish commentaries say that 50 shekels is to be paid in addition to what the normal dowry was, which kind of made sense.
Like a lemon today that they pay.
Well, like a penalty. So, just not a good situation. But, and it may seem unfair, but this is more than any other culture around them had. Women,
and they were such pagan cultures that
women were fair game
every
day.
way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I guess if the daughters were obedient, maybe they were protected in their families by brothers or fathers or something. Do you think?
Yeah, and I don't.
Well, they weren't ever really allowed to go off on their own.
Yeah,
They had to have a chaperone or something if they were underage and stuff like that.
Maybe the premise is that they would be protected.
In theory.
Yeah. Don't know. Okay, Dottie, verse 30. Vicky. I'm looking at Vicky and calling her Dottie. Why I did that?
A man is not to marry his father's wife. He must not violate his father's marriage bed.
Okay, so this is actually about a son marrying his stepmother after dad dies. It's considered incest.
Because it's like his own mother.
Yeah,
No
even though there's no blood.
Jeffs that.
Yeah, nope. This would be disrespectful to his father's bed. Actually, Absalom did that to David while David was still alive. Meant to be an insult. So they were not allowed to do that. It's exactly the same kind of immoral relationship that Paul talks about in the Corinthian church in 1 Corinthians 5. So this was something that was forever, don't do this thing. So I'm debating about, I think we will stop because I don't want to get into the next subject before Christmas.
We can skip the next.
Yeah, and this is the one I especially don't want to do on Christmas Eve. So we will start with 23. On New Year's Eve, we'll start the new year with fun subjects. So.
We'll end the year.